Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're diving deep into a situation unfolding in Maywood, Illinois. Specifically, we're going to untangle what's happening with their parks and recreation. And this story goes all the way back to 2006 to a referendum, in fact. It might sound like ancient history, but the thing is, the choices made back then, well, they're still impacting Maywood residents today.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here to try and make sense of it all. We've been digging through some pretty crucial documents like the Village of Maywood's 2023 audit, getting into the nitty-gritty financials, and also looking at how referendums actually work in Illinois. We really want to make this as clear as possible without getting bogged down in the technical jargon.
Yeah, because this stuff can get complicated quickly. So, okay, let's set the stage. Back in 2006, this referendum popped up on the ballot. The main idea was to basically take all the parks and recreation stuff, the facilities, the responsibility, and move it all from the Village of Maywood over to the Maywood Park District.
Yeah.
Sounds a pretty straightforward way to consolidate things, right?
Makes sense on the surface.
You'd think so. But the catch is, almost 20 years later, that transfer is still, well, it's not finished.
Which is really strange, right? I mean, not only that, but think about the implications. If the park district was meant to take over everything, what was going to happen to the village's own recreation departments?
Yeah, like wouldn't that become redundant?
Exactly. And it seems they thought so too. The referendum likely aimed to dissolve that village department eventually. And get this, the village ordinance, section 31.04, actually formally ended their Department of Playgrounds and Recreation.
Okay, so on paper, it's done. But then we looked at that 2023 audit, specifically page 73, and things got interesting, to say the least. We're talking about some serious financial discrepancies here.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie.
Village of Maywood Recreation Fund, it's showing a deficit, and not just a small one. It's over $1 million in the hole. It's a huge amount of money.
It's wild, isn't it? And here's the kicker. On that same page of the audit, it says that taxpayers are still contributing to this fund. Every single year, there's a property tax levy of $150,000 going straight into this recreation fund that's already drowning in debt.
So it's not just some accounting error,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is real money, your money as a taxpayer, going somewhere it seemingly shouldn't be going. Especially years after voters were pretty clear about wanting parks and recreation handled by the park district.
And that brings up a crucial point. You've got this referendum approved by the people saying, hey, the park district should handle this. You've got the village saying, okay, we're discontinuing our recreation department. And yet you've got this massive deficit in the village's recreation fund, and they're still collecting taxes for it. Something just doesn't add up.
It's like, where is this money even going? If the park district is supposedly running things now, why are we still funneling money into this village fund? It's a pretty big question mark. And speaking of things that don't add up, there was this interesting moment during a Let's Talk Maywood interview. Mayor Booker was chatting with Dr. Reginald Ratliff,
Yeah.
and he said something about referendums that, well, it wasn't quite accurate.
Talking about the thing with the expiration date.
Yeah. He seemed to imply that referendums, like, expire after a certain amount of time. And that's just not how it works in Illinois.
Not at all. It's really important to clear this up for everyone. In Illinois, once a referendum is passed, it sticks around. It doesn't just vanish after a while.
So what Mayor Booker said during that interview, it's just not true. Referendums don't have an expiration date.
Nope, not at all. It's about respecting the will of the people. Once they've spoken through a vote, that decision stays in place unless they vote again to change it.
Makes sense. So that 2006 referendum in Maywood, it's still completely valid, no matter how much time has gone by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That decision is still the guiding principle, legally speaking.
Okay, so let's go back to that referendum for a second.
Back to 2006.
Yep, it wasn't just about shuffling things around. It was a direct instruction from the voters. They wanted parks and recreation in Maywood to be consolidated under the park district, like that was the mandate.
Right. And usually there's a good reason for wanting this kind of consolidation. It's all about efficiency, creating a system that just works better. The idea is that a park district, since that's their sole focus, they can really become experts in running parks and rec. They streamline operations. They might even have better access to funding and grants specifically for those kinds of community resources. Makes a lot of sense in theory.
Yeah, on paper, it's a solid plan. But then you look at what actually happened, and it's like, why, it's a head-scratcher. Despite this super clear directive from the voters, all those years ago, they never fully transferred all the parks and recreation facilities over to the Maywood Park District.
It's a real mystery, and we're not going to speculate on the reasons why right now, but it's a huge piece of the puzzle Why didn't it happen? And then you add in the financial side of things.
Yeah, let's talk money.
That's where things get really confusing. I mean, think about it. If the goal was for the park district to take over, the village's recreation department should have slowly disappeared.
Right, it's because it wouldn't be needed anymore.
Exactly. And remember, the village even made it official. They formally shut down the Department of Playgrounds and Recreation. It was all supposed to be neat and tidy.
So then why in the world does the 2023 audit show this gigantic deficit in the village's recreation fund?
Seriously, you'd think that with the park district in charge and the village department gone, that fund would be shrinking, maybe even disappearing altogether. But instead, it's $1 million in the red.
I mean, over $1 million.
It doesn't make any sense, and it gets worse. Not only is there this existing deficit, but the audit shows they're still adding to it. Every year, $150,000 in property taxes goes right into this fund.
It's like they're pouring money into a black hole. The park district is running the show. The village's department is history. And yet they're still collecting all this money from you, the taxpayers, for a fund that's already in a deep, deep hole.
Where is it all going?
It makes you wonder about transparency. We have a clear directive from the voters. The village supposedly took steps to dismantle their own department, but the finances are a mess. It's like a big flashing red light saying, hold on, what's actually happening here?
Exactly. And remember Mayor Booker's statement? The one about referendums expiring?
Oh, yeah, that whole thing.
It's just not true. We already established that referendums in Illinois, they don't just go away. They represent the will of the voters, and that will remain until the voters decide otherwise. That 2006 decision is still the law of the land.
So let's recap for everyone listening. 2006, the referendum passes. Clear goal. Transfer Parks and Rec to the Park District. The village says, okay, we'll shut down our recreation department. Almost 2 decades later, the transfer is incomplete. The village's recreation fund is massively in debt, and yet they're still taxing residents to add to that debt. Plus, you've got this public statement floating around that throws doubt on the whole foundation of the referendum.
It's a tangled web, right? And we can't ignore the implications. Why hasn't the transfer been finished? Why are they still collecting taxes for a fund that's bleeding money? And how does that misinformation about the referendum affect how things are being handled today? These are the questions we need to be asking.
This is a situation that has dragged on for far too long. And the lack of follow-through, well, it probably has real consequences for the people of Maywood. We're talking about their parks, their recreation programs, and the financial burden they're carrying.
Think about it. When a community clearly votes for something, and then 19 years later it's still not done, what does that do to their trust in the local government? How does it impact their confidence that things will be handled fairly and effectively? These are the bigger questions we need to grapple with.
This deep dive, it's really just the beginning. We hope this gives you a clearer picture of what's going on in Maywood, but there's clearly a lot more to uncover. If you're interested, we encourage you to dig deeper. Maybe check out those audit reports for yourself. Go to some village meetings. Talk to your neighbors about the future of parks and recreation in Maywood.
Knowledge is power, right? The more you know, the better equipped you are to make a difference.
Exactly. Because this isn't just about Maywood. It's a story that plays out in communities across the country. This whole situation, it highlights how important it is to make sure our elected officials are actually following through on what we vote for. It's about transparency, accountability, and making sure that our voices as residents and taxpayers are truly being heard.
And it's a reminder that these decisions have real consequences. They affect our lives, our communities, and the future of the places we call home. It's worth paying attention, staying informed, and making sure we're part of the conversation.
Absolutely. So keep asking questions, keep digging, and keep pushing for a better future for our parks, our communities, and ourselves.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.